This morning we will be spending some time with Elijah. And now Elijah was a bit of a weirdo. He dressed in strange fashions like camel hair robes, and there was no reason for that. People had normal clothes. And he ate locusts. People didn't really do that either. They had cheese and meat and everything else. Elijah was just weird. And Elijah spent his life alternately famous and ridiculed, alternately celebrated and attacked, alternately sought out and avoided. Amidst these alternating extremes, Elijah's life reveals the complexity of our elephant in the room for today: loneliness. It's around, it's all around. Look at the physical arrangement of how we are worshiping. Some people are joining over the internet online, sitting in their own homes by themselves, and some are here on campus and we're worshiping in isolated pods, separated from each other, isolated by households in cars or inside. We can feel it. Even the way we worship feels lonely. And even when loneliness isn't felt, it's the pervasive presence that's lurking behind most decisions. Kids need to go back to school, and as much as learning, we hear about socialization. Kids need to be with other kids. It's the damage, the worry of loneliness. Interjected into debates on the efficacy of the lockdown and on stay-at-home orders, amid points on the economy and infection rates, were comments about loneliness. These comments like, I just can't anymore. I feel alone. I feel so alone. I can't stay home even one more day. We understand that it's a human reaction. And this really makes sense. Loneliness is so hard because our God is a God of three persons in one. God has never been alone. And then God creates the world and he creates Adam, and Adam is alone, so he creates Eve. Loneliness, it's not good. Loneliness is hard. And the long nights are longest, and the heavy silences the heaviest, and imposed changes the most imposing when they are suffered alone. At least the presence of another, it diffuses the tension. When the dark is too much, children run to their parents' bed, and when the silence is too much, we phone a friend. Loneliness can be a wet blanket on a cold day. Now, Elijah knows about loneliness. In the story that we're about to read today, he is the last prophet in Israel. And all the other prophets have been executed or abandoned their faith, and still Elijah stands up alone against all the prophets of Baal, against the false prophets and these enemies of God's people. The spiritual fortitude to challenge them all, and they are all burnt to a crisp by the power of God. But instead of being celebrated, instead of his isolation being broken, instead of friendship or welcome, Elijah's life is threatened. And for Elijah, it's too much. He cracks Elijah and his servant. They take off, fleeing into the wilderness. And then in the wilderness, he leaves behind his servant and goes deeper into the wild, hides under a bush, and there, physically as alone as he feels, completely by himself under a bush in the depths of the wilderness, he prays that God would let him die. I've had enough. Let me die. This is the picture of loneliness we are most familiar with. It isn't just a physical isolation. When Elijah is surrounded by hundreds of prophets of Baal, he is in close proximity to hundreds of other human beings. They are aware of him, but he feels completely alone. He is completely alone. Because loneliness is about a deficit of connection. When no one else in the world gets it, when no one is standing with you, it doesn't matter if there are people anywhere. It's lonely. It's why you can live in New York City in close proximity to hundreds of people and still feel alone. Because it's not about proximity or population. It's about love. It's about connection. We love our families more than our neighbors, and we love our neighbors more than our countrymen in general, and we love our countrymen more than humanity at large. It's how we love, with decreasing amounts of love connected to increasing size of the group. So imagine those who only receive the most general love, the love of those who online or on TV love humanity at large, or when as the church we proclaim God's love generally, not specifically to you, not given to you specifically. Just God's love, generally distributed across the globe. The person receives love as a fraction, never for them specifically, just part of this generality. They are loved as a fraction of a fragment. Imagine that person and the loneliness they feel. Like Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, if you are left to live off of a crumb of love, a fraction of a fragment, you're liable to climb off into fantastical tales of other worlds, liable to act out, to scream, to rebel, because even being 100% hated is better than a fraction of a fragment of love. Loneliness is crushing. Elijah knows this, even surrounded by people, he is alone. And this year, throughout this pandemic, in the year 2020, we have all joined Elijah. Well, at least visited, if not completely joined him. There have been times where we have felt alone. And there have been those who have been very, very alone. Those in nursing homes, those who are in long-term care, those who are sick or who are compromised. It's been lonely. Lonely. This is an adjective, a descriptive form of the word alone. But is lonely bad? Is lonely bad? An angel finds Elijah hiding under a bush, miles away from anyone, and he taps him on the shoulder and he says, "Get up and eat, or the journey ahead of you will be too much." And so he does, and then God sends Elijah into a different kind of loneliness. 40 days and 40 nights he travels deeper into the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights away from everyone and everything, until he arrives at the mountain of the Lord. And Elijah is sent by God. But upon arriving, even God highlights Elijah's loneliness. So hear now the word of the Lord from 1 Kings chapter 19. And the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." And the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." And then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. What are you doing here? What an absurd thing to say! God sent Elijah on this journey 40 days and 40 nights deeper into the wilderness. He's hungry and he's tired and he's gross and he feels completely alone, and the world is all behind him. Completely alone, except for the fact that Elijah will not let go of God. And here he is throwing himself on God's mercy for relief. 40 days and nights later, he arrives, and then God says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" It's almost offensive, isn't it? He doesn't affirm Elijah. He doesn't thank him for coming. He doesn't encourage him along the journey. He says, "What are you doing here?" And with that question, God sets Elijah completely alone. Why are you here? Without any social pressure, without the queen who is trying to kill you, without the support of other prophets, without your servants' judging eyes, why are you here? And Elijah basically says, "I have been faithful and the world out there is awful and I'm going to die." And then there is this powerful wind that tears the mountains and shatters the rocks, but God is not in the wind. And then the earthquake, but God is not in the earthquake. And a fire, in that same fire that burned the prophets of Baal, is now burning the rocks themselves on the ground. But God isn't there either. The swirling, tumultuous chaos that recedes. And there, completely alone, 40 days and nights from the nearest person, Elijah hears a stillness. He covers his face and he goes out and he hears a voice whisper, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Where is loneliness good, except good at making us feel closed in? Where does it elevate except to elevate anxiety and despair? What does it promise except to capsize dreams? What does it do except to build up things as darker, harder, worse? Where is loneliness good? Except that it is in Elijah's loneliness that he is finally able to listen past the swirling, tumultuous chaos and hear God's whisper. God's question, "What are you doing here?" is not an accusation. It's a real question. Why are you here? And that question, it transforms Elijah's loneliness. It is no longer the loneliness that has been imposed upon him by consistent rejection, by being forgotten, by being the only one to believe this, to stand for this. Elijah's loneliness is no longer the loneliness of isolation, but it is the loneliness of self-determination. It is the kind of being alone necessary for making a choice for yourself. Why are you here? Is it just your Sunday routine? Is it pressure from someone else? Is it obligation or hope or fear? Why are you here? More important than knowing a correct answer is knowing the truth. Why are you here? Not why are other people here, but why are you here? We take that answer and we give it to God. This is why I am here, me alone, me. This is my reason for better or worse. You see, what we learn from Elijah is that if we do not spend time alone, then we will never find our own opinions, our words, our beliefs. If we do not spend time alone, we will forever echo others' beliefs. If we do not spend time alone, we will reflect other people's faith. But God won't show up in a reflection. God's arrival is preceded by this question: why are you here? In our tradition, we baptize infants, but before they can become church members, we confirm them. They have to answer, why are you here? It's a question they must answer alone. Not that they can't have help, not that we don't walk with them, but in the end, to truly answer that question, there must be a moment where they stand alone and answer for themselves, I am here because God is here. Loneliness. It's been an unwanted elephant for these past several months. For some, it has been crippling and it's lasted far too long. And we have an obligation to be present in ways that we can. To call, to send letters, to wave from outside the window. But for others, loneliness has pushed us into clarity. At least something closer to clarity, a time to hear God speaking to us, a time to answer God's question, why are you here? Because until we can answer the question on our own, we will never find our beliefs. We will never find our own faith. Why are you here? I am here because God has been faithful to me. And I am here because God will be faithful to me. I am here because God has set before me a people whom I love, a people whom I am called to serve. I am here because of God's great love for me and my desire to love him back. So why are you here? Why are you here?